Welcome to NovoEDTalks, a podcast for authentic, honest conversations about talent development and the people shaping it. On this show, we sit down with leaders across learning and development, mentorship, leadership development, HR, and people strategy to talk about what's really working, what's changing, and what they're learning along the way. These aren't surface-level interviews. They're candid conversations about building skills, developing leaders, supporting managers, and creating experiences that actually move organizations forward. Before we jump in, a quick word about NovoED. Founded at Stanford's Social Algorithms Lab in 2012, NovoED is a people-centric talent development platform built for enterprises and training providers. Business transformation starts with people, and people perform better on NovoED. In today's fast-changing landscape, upskilling requires a new approach. NovoED makes it easy to move beyond the talent development status quo by combing social, collaborative, cohort-based learning with real-world application. The result is future-ready talent built on a platform designed to turn learning into measurable impact. Now, let's meet our guests for today's NovoEDTalks episode. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the NovoEDTalks podcast, a space for talent development trailblazers to get real. My name is Melissa Fisk. I'm the producer of the NovoEDTalks podcast, and today I am joined by Alex Kinney, who is the Director of Learning and Development for Octapharma USA. Alex Kinney is an industrial organizational psychologist and current Director of Learning and Development at Octapharma USA. Alex, thank you so much for joining us on the NovoEDTalks podcast today. Welcome.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Well, why don't you start by just kind of introducing yourself a little bit more, talking about your role and the scope of learning and development that you're responsible for today.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of teed it up well. I'm Alex. I'm an IO psychologist by training. I've had a weird circuitous career. I worked in software as a service for a long time. I worked directly as a sales leader. So I've been both quota-carrying salesperson, sales leader, and now back to IO, right? So you always end up back where you started. I'm the director of L&D. I'm responsible for the U.S. operations of Octapharma. We're a global company, about 11,000 employees, about $5 billion in revenue. For pharma, that's small. We are we're like micro pharma. But yeah, so I've been here about 2 years, and I really love the role so far. I love the challenges, and happy to talk about some of them today.
Awesome. Well, why don't you start by just talking about, who your learners are that you're supporting and, what some of the pressures or challenges that, are most present for them right now.
Yeah, so I support mostly managers and above, right? So these are exempt salaried employees. I'm also supporting the sales team as well. So we have a field sales team as the structuration. We have half of our folks in the field out. We're in 48 states. And then we also have the HQ here in Paramus, New Jersey. So both of those are under my purview. Not a lot of frontline workers, to be candid. So I hope that's a little different. A lot of folks have like these huge manufacturing floors. Like, yes, we have manufacturing, but that's not my realm, right?
Alex, if you picture the ideal state of learning or talent and development at your organization, maybe specifically for this group of managers and your sales team, what does that actually look like in practice?
Yeah, I love the question because L&D, there's what you want it to be, and then there's what you end up being, right? Where sometimes, I mean, you've done this 100 times. You've probably heard people just say, "Oh, well, I'm the training factory, and I build." It's like I pump out content when people need things. So that's what I don't want to be, right? What I do want to be is a strategic partner to the business. That's also something you probably hear all the time. It's easier said than done, right? So I call it an internal consultancy. I don't know if that's helpful for folks to visualize, but I want to be where you go when you're like, hey, I have this issue. And not to diatribe too hard, but I'm sure every L&D professional is familiar with folks coming up to them and saying, I have a training problem. The way they phrase it is always a thorn in my side. Like, I need a training. And I'm like, I don't know what that even means. I don't know if you do either, right? It's probably not. It could be 50 different things, but I want L&D to be framed in a way where we're adding value instead of just pumping out training, right? So we're getting there. It's a process, but
Yeah, no, absolutely. I love that. And because I think that is something that a lot of folks listening to this podcast right now can relate to. So where do you feel like there's still the biggest gap between this like ideal state of being this internal consultancy or, I know you're operating there, but like the ideal state of that and where you're at today? Where do you think the biggest gap is?
I think that folks don't know what L&D does. Recently, someone comes up to me to go, hey, I have a training issue. the folks in the field don't know how to use this form. They're not filling out this form when they do their expenses. And immediately I said, that's probably not a training issue. I think they know how to use the form. They're not doing it. So where is that barrier, right? So I have to kind of coach the org through that mindset, if that makes sense. I want to coach the org through being solutions oriented instead of busy, right? So again, that's an example where again we dug into it. If there is a problem with the process, now you have a training problem because I have to train the new process, right? Like that. Now I can help. But before you didn't have a problem with your form, you had a problem with folks adhering to the process. So maybe it was too difficult. Maybe there's a tech barrier there. Maybe there's a manager barrier there. Like, it could be 600 different things, but that's where I want to be is folks feel comfortable with that kind of conversation.
I love that, and just, like, being able to get deep and actually, like and maybe even, like, not to make this so deep, but, like, vulnerable, like, in these things where it's like, "Hey, well, let's just, like, take a step back and what's really going on here." Speaking about vulnerability, psychological safety has become a major topic in leadership and workplace culture conversations. How do you personally define it in practice, and how important is it to effective learning and development?
Yeah, I think, the last question first, it's critical. I don't think you can have a functioning learning or talent development area without psychological safety. I don't think you can have a functioning org without psychological safety.
Agreed.
I don't think you can have a healthy organization if you can't fail safely. And that would be my definition is personally to me, it's the ability to fail safely. And one thing that I don't hear people talking a lot about, I was just at the CLO exchange in Boston. Shout out to them. But we were talking a lot about psychological safety, and I think it's one of those things where you have to have a shared understanding that you're acting in good faith. That's the term I use is like good faith. Because if I say something and I'm putting myself out there and I get told that I'm stupid, well, why would I share it again, right? So you have to understand the things I'm saying are because I think they're what's best for Octapharma or they're best for wherever you work, right? If you don't have that underlying agreement, then it's really hard to do anything. Honestly, I don't know how you do anything as an org.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I love the way you phrase that, like this mutual understanding of like everyone's operating on good faith. And I think that's maybe a simple way to put it, but still like missing out a lot of organizations. And I think that's so important.
For sure. And I think just to put a pin in that, it's where they fall short is vision. I don't think they have a shared vision of where we're going. That's what leadership's job should be, in my opinion, is just guiding the vision and then making everyone feel like their work connects to that vision. Now, whether you do that through new goal setting cadences, performance management processes, however you want to get there, I do think that's the underlying goal.
I love that. That kind of gets me into my next question in a roundabout way. But, how are you designing learning experiences to ensure that learning actually sticks?
I have a bone to pick with L&D here, I guess, if this is controversial, maybe, but I get annoyed when folks say, well, not annoyed, nothing really annoys me these days, but I get bothered when folks say, oh, completion rates and attendance tell you nothing. Well, they don't tell you nothing. They don't tell you a lot. I'm not making that argument, but but like they're not telling you nothing. You know more if the folks attended it and actually completed it than you did before. So starting there again, the metrics are not always the sexiest thing in the world. And the IO psychology term is transfer. You want transfer of training. Did the things I teach that the things that I taught you in the classroom change your behavior on the workplace? Did I transfer from classroom to workplace? The easiest way you do that, here's your actual question. The easiest way you do that is by making it really similar to their real world work environment. And we have all the technology in the world to do that. So I'll give a frontline example, even though I just said I don't work with the frontline folks. VR and AR training has made that just leaps and bounds more effective because you're emulating the environment that they're working in. More realistically. So that's how you make sure learning sticks is A, you meet the learner where they're at, and B, you try to replicate their on-job environment as much as possible. So another example of that concretely would be like my sales team. I want the training they go through, the things we talk about, the word tracks they practice to be as deeply similar to real life as possible. I'll bring in like real doctors right now, like, and this is for role play. Like I'll go out in the field and I'll see the types of verbiage that these doctors use or these HCPs, and we try to replicate that in the training environment, so it's as real as possible.
I love that. And, beyond just I like that you don't dismiss attendance or completion rates because you need some place to start, right? To start having conversations and metrics to have bigger conversations to go off of. So I like that you mentioned that. And then, kind of beyond that, are there certain indicators that you look for that tell you whether people kind of genuinely feel safe participating, contributing, or like speaking honestly in these kind of, real world learning experiences?
Yeah, it sounds like such a silly platitude, but opening up with, "Hey, this is a safe place to fail," right? This is like just saying it out loud. I know again that seems like an overly simple thing, but that can go a long way. I open my sessions with, "Look, this is training. I'm learning right now. I every session I run, again, it sounds counterintuitive. I want it to be the worst version of that session because I want to be able to take the things that I learned from that session and apply them to the next one. So I never want it to be at the same level twice. And I say that up front. The other thing I remind them of is mindfully, if you're going to fail here or out in front of the person you're trying to sell to, which one of those would you pick? It's going to be the safe space every time, right? So this is the place to try new things and to experiment them, not out in the field where there's actual consequences.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And we all fail, right? We're going to fail. Like it's inevitable. I think we all need to get a little bit more comfortable with that, like where as becoming a mom has helped me become a lot more comfortable with that. But I think like making sure that's a super important part of training is really, really important because like you just mentioned, yeah, you'd much rather have folks fail in a safe training environment than out in the field.
Yeah, when it comes to sales and training, that's my only tip is say it out loud at the top of the hour.
Absolutely. I love that. Switching gears a little bit here, there's been a huge shift from soft skills to what many are calling durable or even power skills. Talking about things like judgment, discernment, decision making, emotional intelligence, communication, all of that. How is your team thinking about skills development in this moment, especially as AI accelerates everything?
So AI is one of those things where I'll tell you this. I was at a conference probably 10 years ago, dating myself, but I was at a conference doing this stuff about 10 years ago. And we had this discussion where, oh, soft skills are dead. Soft skills are going to if you're not an engineer, what are you doing? If you don't know how to do Python, what's the point? Right. So, um, I don't tell this anecdote just because I was right at the end of the day, but I said, it's one reason. But I was like, I think that focusing on those concrete skills is kind of scary because technology is only getting better. And now we're sitting here in the AI age where we have tools that are more intelligent than all the humans put together, but they have no wisdom. So that's the barrier I try to draw. Yeah, there's a difference between intelligence and wisdom. And I'll say this, the soft skills or power skills or core skills, whatever you want to call them, they're critical. And frankly, my personal opinion, they're all that really is going to matter in the next 5-10 years because you don't need to know how to type Python anymore. Like first and second year coders aren't even doing any coding. I still have a ton of colleagues at software companies. Their first few years of the training curriculum doesn't even involve writing code. These are coders. They're not writing code. Like, I don't know how much more obvious it could be that the skills that people need to succeed are not just technical skills. So, think about somebody 5 years ago or 10 years ago in the L&D space who was an instructional designer, and they're amazing at using Adobe Captivate. That skill, not to be rude, is like borderline useless right now. AI can create content. Anyone can create nice looking content now with the tools we have. So you really have to be sure that you're working on yourself, working on your mindset, and working on skills like communication, dealing with ambiguity, those power skills. Sorry for the long answer, but
No, I love that. And it tees up my next question, which is, obviously there are still some technical or role-based skills I think that we'll still be teaching, whether it's because of fear of to totally rely on AI yet, or just like, no, we can't like totally go that route yet or not. So how do you kind of in this time of mass change, right? How do you shift balance like building human capability skills while still giving some attention to these technical or role-based skill sets?
yeah, that's actually probably the hardest part is the job related skills because you have to go all the way back and deconstruct what the job is and what it does for the organization. Um, and now that's a huge project. You have to do a full JA, job analysis, as we say, break down what are the tasks they do, why do they do them, what skills require you to do those tasks well? What traits does the person have that does well? Like, IO psychology is can be very dense, honestly. And that's one of the most dense ones is like job related skills and things like that, in my opinion. Because the way I bucket it at Octapharma is I have these core competencies: active listening, dealing with ambiguity, decision making, building others. These are core skills that we all share. To work at Octapharma, you have to display some level of those skills, right? And then you have the job related skills, and then you have the technical hard skills. So again, I'm long answer to your short question, but the technical skills that you need, I think, right now, as cringe and annoying as it is to say, are using AI to moderate your on job tasks. Right? That's going to be the great moderator for your on job stuff.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that brings me to my next question, which is how are you, is AI part of your learning strategy? Are you teaching AI or just encouraging use of AI? Like, where are you seeing the most value in that? You kind of just started touching on it, but go deeper with that.
It's something that I think every org, I say this partially just to self-soothe. I think that every org is behind on AI enablement. I think that that's universal. I hope it's universal anyway, because I don't know if we're where I'm happy with. I don't know if we're where I think we should be, but AI is such a weird nebulous thing. We still don't really know the limits of it. A lot of orgs are just recently finding out how much it costs, frankly. They're looking at these they're thinking, oh, we can just not hire people and have AI. And then they look at what they spent on tokens and they're like, well, wait a minute. This is as much as an employee. And we're losing the human aspect. So yeah, I think that we're getting better at it. And the way you teach AI is just saying, hey, these are the tools at hand. Think about what you do daily and how they could interact with that or how you can interface with it. But it's not going to take your job over. It can't do your job. Um, that's important to mention too.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And how do you think about kind of, the trade-off? This is a question that or I think comes up a lot, and people are talking about how they're navigating it and no one's perfected it yet, of course, but, like, how are you thinking about the trade-off between, like, efficiency and quality when it comes to AI, like, versus, quantitative gains versus qualitative outcomes?
That's also org based. I mean, concrete example for learning and development is when Gen AI started building e-learning content in the LMS. Like people were this is probably 3-4 years ago, and folks came out, and I used to work for an LMS company for context. So I'm like very rooted in the learning space, the e-learning space. Um, they started coming out with these Gen AI and they said you can make content really fast. You can pump out all this content. And I was banging my head. I said, we don't have a content quantity problem. We have a content quality problem. You could go buy Udemy and have 40, not that it's hashtag ad, but you can go buy Udemy and 40,000 courses at your fingertips. There you go. There's your content library. What are you going to do with it? How are you going to map it to growth plan? How are you mapping it to talent development? You know, Giving someone the ocean doesn't mean they're going to be able to swim. So, the difference between quantity and quality cannot be overstated. And we don't need more content. We actually need less content, is my cold take. I think a lot of folks agree with that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. We have, like, no attention span anymore, right? So I think it's like more content is definitely not the answer given the way that we're consuming content, right? But, thinking about just, you know, navigating all of that, are there certain guardrails that, you're or design principles that you're suggesting that you use or putting up with folks using AI to make sure that, we're enhancing the human part of it and not just like the let's just pump out content for the sake of pumping content part of it out.
Yeah, another work in progress of how like the other thing I'm big on is collaborative learning. So that was a buzzword for a little bit, but I think collaborative learning is really important. And as L&D, you still have to be the control tower. Like you can have some co-pilots, but you're not, no pun intended with the AI, but you you need some co-pilots, but you're still the control tower. And you have to be really ruthless, at least I am the only person who can publish content at Octapharma. And I know that sounds kind of control freaky, but I want folks to be involved, but I still want to be the one who publishes it at the end of the day. And then there's a lot of train the trainer that goes on there.
Yeah, I love that, and I think that's good though because it's otherwise it can become so out of hand so quickly. I mean, look at your LinkedIn feed, case in point. Like your LinkedIn feed, no, is anyone writing a LinkedIn post anymore themselves? You know, like
The AI squap effect. And
yeah.
the other one that cracks me up is now people in college, most higher ed students are just using AI all the time. It's like 90% of people. And then the professors are using AI to save them time on grading papers. So you have this paper that was written by AI being graded by an AI platform. And it's just robots talking to each other. And it's like, wait a minute, let's take a step back. Like, why are we doing this? Why? That's my big takeaway. Ask why. Why the hell does AI help us with that? Is it even a task that AI needed to be doing? Like, is it, now we have robots talking to each other at this point. Like, we got to stop and slow down, I think, not to be alarmist.
No, no, I think that's super important, and that brings me into another topic around AI too that we touched on a little bit earlier, which is kind of that, like, psychological safety component of it is, do you think AI changes how employees communicate, participate, or speak up inside organizations? And are there, psychological safety implications that we should be thinking about when it comes to folks using AI?
I'll be positive on this because I feel like I've been rather cynical in the last few minutes. but but my positive spin is that AI will actually help us because it sort of levels the playing field, if you will. We all have access to it. Everyone could write a really well put email now. Writing ability is not one of those things where you have to feel stupid. You actually can feel a little empowered, maybe. So again, on a positive spin, you can feel empowered with these tools to speak up and feel like you have a more level playing field a lot of the time. So that's again positive spin on AI. I think it'll actually help long term as long as we invest in coaching psychological safety and EQ and things like that. That's where I want to be more deliberate.
Absolutely, and I love that, and I think that's so true, and I've seen that just, like, in my experience with using AI and using it to help me, like, write better emails or, like, have difficult conversations and, like, get talking points, but I also have a level of emotional intelligence and self-awareness that I'm like, "Okay, I know I can be reactionary, so I don't wanna come across and, like, check what I just wrote in this email. Is this reactionary?" And it's like, yeah, like, being able to kinda use it that way is
Amazing. And that's mostly what I'm trying to focus on as an org is and it's okay to feel a certain way when you get feedback. Getting feedback's really hard. It's not something that's easy. Having a growth mindset is really hard. It takes a lot of work. This is not stuff that's gonna come overnight, but it will in the long term make us a more happy and engaged org, if you will.
yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. Sticking with the kind of psychological safety topic a little bit, just because I think this is such obviously you have great experience with it. And I think it's so important that organizations focus on a little bit more than maybe they are right now. But how interconnected do you think emotional intelligence and psychological safety really are? Like, especially when it comes to leadership effectiveness?
Yeah, I think they're inextricably linked. I don't think you could have one without the other. Um, you know, you have to have a high EQ to be self-aware, or you have to at least work on your EQ to be self-aware. And those are two of the concentric circles of psych safety and EQ. There's a ton of overlap there. Understanding that you're not a finished product, understanding that the people around you aren't a finished product. So that's really self-awareness and empathy in a lot of ways. So that encircles kind of the last few topics we've talked about, right? Is what does it mean to be human anymore? What does that even mean to work together? Um, what do we need to do in the workplace to be effective in the age of AI, in the age of, frankly, selfishness? I think a lot of folks are really um, self-driven and selfish in a lot of ways, and they only think about themselves, and they look at, speaking bluntly, I've seen so many executives where they look at feedback as just a place to dunk on people, just a place to just like absolutely throw it down on their subordinates. I think that's really gross and wrong. Goes without saying, but yeah, I think especially in the AI age, we need to coach upwards. You're only as effective as your leadership and as your manager level.
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking about, leaderships being aware of that, one challenge that you see with psychological safety is that sometimes it becomes very performative. Like organizations like to say the right things culturally, but then employees and especially where you work with a lot of managers, like maybe lower level employees don't actually feel that safe speaking up. So how are you, kind of teaching your managers to understand like when it's, that difference? Because I think that's hard sometimes for people to navigate and understand.
Yeah, I kind of coined that term a little bit at the CLO exchange where I'm like, is it performative psychological safety? Do you actually want their input, or are you just doing it because you think it's what you're supposed to do? So what I do is I roll it back when I do the manager training as far as like there is value in getting their feedback, right? Like you have someone to answer to at the end of the day too. Do you want your responses to be as educated and you know thoughtful as possible, or do you just want to be spewing nonsense from your perspective, right? So um talking about growth mindset, talking about EQ, the value, I think as a whole, that's really the only way to get folks to care about training anyway, is to understand what's in it for me. I say, with them, what's in it for me? That's part of andragogy. I mean, that is literally one of the principles of andragogy is I have to understand why this applies to me. So yeah, there's a lot of work that goes into that. And again, I can't do it myself. I think empowering managers and directors is how I'm gonna get through this. You go middle out. I'm not saying middle out is the ideal way to do it, but it's what works for my org. And that's the other thing you have to be in learning is adaptive. Understand where your org is at. Understand the needs of your organization. Not what works at Salesforce is not going to work here. I'll tell you right now, it's too different. It's not the same company. So we have to apply those kind of baseline psych principles into my environment.
Absolutely, and I think even that is just again, it's such a simple concept, everyone's like, "Oh, yeah, no, I know that, like, just because it worked there, it won't work here." I think especially nowadays is, like, we'll see, like, you know, at a conference, someone gives a presentation about how they did things at their organization, and it's so easy to leave feeling inspired and be like, "Oh, we need to do it. Let's do that. Let's do exactly what that person did," and it so quickly loses like the, "Hey, but is that even gonna work for our people or what we're doing or what are we already working on?" Or, and things like that, and I don't think it's not obviously, like, malicious or, like, ill-intended, it has the best of intentions, but, like, we get so excited or inspired by new things, new methods, new tools that we forget to take a minute and be like, "Wait, is this actually gonna work for our processes, our operations, and most importantly, our people, and, like, how they're operating the org right now?"
Couldn't have said it better. 100% context is everything. I mean, that's what osteology is. I always say it's the art of taking empirical research and translating into your organization and understanding how it can be used. That's really all it is.
Absolutely. Alex, switching gears here a little bit, as you look to kind of the next few years, what do you believe L&D leaders need to unlearn, and what do they need to double down on?
Yeah, again, it depends where you are. I'll speak in broad generalities. Stop screaming AI a bunch of times and thinking that means anything. Please, please, I beg of everyone. I beg of not just L&D. Please just stop saying
Hey, we did good today. It didn't come up till question 7, I think we
adding agentic to what you said doesn't make it smarter or more reasonable. No, again, I kind of mentioned it, but the thing you need to unlearn is that you're not a training factory. I I see a lot of that where the business will come to you and say, "Hey, I need a training." Your first thing you do, and most folks do this to be fair, but say is why? Why do you feel you need that? What impact will it have, and how will we deliver it? The way I put it is I tell the managers, you start at the finish line. Like, what would it look like? Let's say we did all this. If I had a magic wand, you said, I need a training on this. I think the sales team is really bad at opening calls. Okay. What would it look like if I ran some 6-week project? What gains do we actually make? So asking why, asking the what and the how, I think is really important. As far as what we need to double down on, um, being a strategic business partner, coaching upwards as far as like what the hell we do. That's like again sounds simple, but I don't think anyone understands what L&D is. I really don't. No one understands what IO psychology is. No one understands what L&D is. Just because you understand it at a really high level and you can spin off and play buzzword bingo with the best of them doesn't mean that you're actually driving an impact. Doesn't mean that your leadership understands what you do. It breaks my heart when I see downturns and L&D or training resources or change management, TD. These are the first people laid off. I'm like, if you had any idea what you were doing, they'd be last people you let go because you're about to deal with a huge change. Think about COVID. I know another. Thank goodness we're not talking about that all the time anymore. But COVID, think about what a change that was. And a lot of L&D people got laid off. It's like, no, hold on. Those are the people in your org who know how to deal with this. Those are the first line of people that you should be going and talking to because I don't think the business understood that in terms of what they did or what their background is.
Yeah, no, absolutely. We had a great woman on recently, Sonia Overstreet, who talked about how she just the way she phrased it, and I might butcher this a little bit, but she talked about how like L&D was performance improvement. Like L&D equals like performance improvement or like performance outcomes in your organization. And like that she was like, that's my like one thing I will stand on. It's like that's what it is. It's not anything other than that. And then that obviously switches the lens up on it where it's like, oh yeah, this is so important. Every organization needs this. So like we have to absolutely have this. So
You have to sell it. Everything in life is sales. That's another platitude that I will die on that hill. Everything in life is sales, seriously. If you're a doctor, you're selling your treatment plan to your patient. If you're a teacher, you're selling your curriculum to those students. If you're L&D, you're selling to the org that you are building value and that performance actually drives revenue. That's the connection you have to make.
yeah, no, absolutely. I love that. And that's a really good breakdown. Alex, to close, what's one lesson you've learned as a leader about emotional intelligence, psychological safety, or human development that you wish you'd known earlier in your career?
All of the above. I wish I had known more about them. I think yeah, exactly. I wish that, earlier in my career, someone had taught me about EQ or I think growth mindset is the one that goes unmentioned. I want to stop on growth mindset for a sec because I think that moderates how effective you are at literally everything. And I wish earlier in my career I was taught that because I was someone who was really defensive about feedback. I still kind of am. It's still an area for improvement. I say it all the time. Um, but a sales manager actually sat me down and said, you're very good at this, but you're not as good as you think you are. And I wish, I wish that had happened 5 years earlier. Because that's a really brash, salesy way to put that. That's a sales bro way of putting that. But that's basically saying, hey, you have a fixed mindset. You have a little bit of Dunning Kruger effect, and this is actually where you're at. So I really do wish that earlier in my career and earlier in my life, they should teach their stuff in school, not to get on that TED Talk rant, but they should, you know, I could derail us for 40 minutes on my rant on why they need to teach this stuff in schools. But yeah, if I knew it early in my life, I think the sky would be the limit for anyone who embraces this stuff truly.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it is important, and I think that is something that I agree with you that should be taught in school because especially with, we have no idea like what the future is going to bring, especially like look how fast AI came on and changed it. Like that is there's going to be a next thing and a next thing and a next thing and a next thing. And we have to be always willing to adapt and grow and kind of navigate that, and like the more natural that is for people's and especially leaders, I think the better off we'll be. So,
For sure. I couldn't agree more.
Alex, thank you so much for joining us today on the NovoEd Talks podcast. It was an absolute pleasure having you here.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. I had a blast.
Awesome. And thank you to our listeners for tuning in to another episode of NovoEd Talks.